Hi everybody, it's Sylvia and Peter. We are back with another topic that is quite in the news at the moment. So when you see it, the waves might have died down a little bit, but in the UK, the leader of the Labour Party is of course hoping to become the Prime Minister very soon, and he's gearing up all his campaigning because there's going to be a general election coming up soon. So he has decided that he's going to fix a number of things by giving the NHS, the National Health Service, some targets for hip operations and cardiac problems, whatever it was he mentioned. And he has now promised that he will reduce the increasing rate of suicide. So he's going to reduce the suicide rate within the next 5 years by putting targets on the NHS. Now, I don't know how he's going to do that, but typically for politicians, and I don't care which party they belong to, they only say what and maybe who should do it, but not how. So, Sylvia, do you have any idea how you are going to reduce the suicide rate by giving NHS some targets?
No, is the answer, short answer. I don't know how he's going to manage to do this. My immediate reaction is we already have waiting lists, ridiculously long waiting lists. I know of someone who went to their GP and is on suicide watch and is still waiting for an appointment 18 months later. This person has then had to go privately. How are we going to reduce suicide rates and give the NHS targets when the NHS are doing all they possibly can with what they have? And how can they meet any targets when they can't meet the ones that they have now? And how does a Labour Party or any government party think that they can do more than what people have already gone before them done? I get very disheartened and despondent at this, you know, with all this awareness that we have, all the conversations that we have, the Time to Talk days, the mental health awareness weeks, the mental health awareness months, suicide prevention, World Mental Health Day. Why are suicide rates, they don't change? Every 40 seconds around the world, someone takes their own life. In the UK, every 2 hours. I mean, you know, we've heard all these stats. They don't change. And I don't quite know how Keir Starmer and the Labour Party think they're going to reduce these rates within 5 years without some serious input. Is it getting more counsellors, more coaches, more social workers, more GPs? As with so many things, the why and the what, we all know that, but it's the how. As with all these things, we need more detail as to how this is going to happen. I personally think more has to be done in the area of prevention, so people don't get to that crisis area. How we do that, I believe, is more education in schools, and I know there's a lot being driven along those lines, but I don't know how he plans to do this. Great that he's actually recognised the need and it has been pushed up the agenda. I think that's fabulous. But when we have like the 3 Dads Walking and the Baton of Hope campaigns going on that are driven by individuals that have been at the tragic, and there's no other word, I can't think of a bigger word, end of losing people to suicide, doing so much raising awareness, at least it's going up the agenda. That's all I can say, really.
And I think that's the only positive thing about his statement, because he is asking the NHS, in effect, to reduce the rate of suicide. But NHS is not the cause of suicides. So there's nothing the NHS can do to prevent people taking their own lives. Partly because people don't turn up if they think they don't want to live anymore. Very often we keep it to ourselves. nobody's business. It's enough we don't think anyone can help us anyway, so we don't seek help. If you don't seek help, you can't be helped. Therefore, the NHS doesn't have a fair chance of doing anything. And it has been suggested before, I think, by the current government in whatever incarnations it has been in, that we should have more psychologists in the NHS. That doesn't work either, I believe, because you can't just manpower your way out of this when there's so many deep social issues out there that are causing the problems. So all you then do is you let people get to a crisis point, you get them some help, and then hope that they don't go and take their own life. But they're no further forward, they're no better off, they're in no better position back home where the problems come from. So we need to look at where do these issues come from that make people go and want to end it all. And there's a number of reasons why that happens. But if we go back into the business world, for example, what every employer can do is their duty to make sure that people don't get ill from going to work, whether it's physical or psychological. And we spend so much time at work anyway, so why not make that a nice place to be so that the pressure points there are reducing? But it's a bigger problem than putting targets on the NHS. It just won't work.
And I think, to your point there about more about prevention, and how do you put a target on prevention? How do you measure prevention? You say about the workplace, having those workplaces where people do feel comfortable to speak up, to avail themselves of the resources that so many organisations have put in, and some of those resources are incredible resources, for the people to know that they exist, to be able to go and use them before they get to crisis. And also it's also a very private matter, as you alluded to earlier. I know my own self, I wouldn't go and talk to someone because it was a very private matter. Eventually, when I went to speak to my GP, everything through hard work and counselling, everything else, I recovered. But it's also recognising that I did have an issue and I did need to go and speak to someone. I struggled for about 3 years before I actually recognised that I did. And I think that is also in the workplace. It's not all about telling everyone everything. It's recognising, spotting the signs of someone if they're struggling, having those conversations, signposting them to organisations or the internal support that they have. And then where does targets fit into that? You can't really drive recovery, in my opinion, too much by targets. Targets and data is fabulous, information, awareness is fabulous, but it's how we do it and what we do is the important matter, I think, in the workplace, for people to be in those cultures, be in those environments where it is okay not to be okay. You can maintain your privacy, but knowing where you can go and seek help, and also not to be concerned, worried, ashamed that we're not okay. Because if we had, a physical illness, we go and sort something out there. I think that's also the key, is breaking down that stigma more and more and more, breaking down that fear. In my own case, the fear that potentially it's a long-term thing. In my case, it wasn't. It was an episode. But I think it's about that recognition that it's okay to go and get help. It's as simple as that.
There was just a thought coming into my head as you spoke there, and that is, if we put demands on NHS to fix, if you like, the rising trend of death by suicide, then there will be a tendency for people to just sit back and wait for NHS to sort my problems. We have to put responsibility where it belongs, and each person does have a responsibility to themselves to raise the awareness to somebody else. I'm struggling, whatever that means. But maybe also in the community, in in the workplace. So I spoke about employers they have a legal duty to not make their employees ill. But what about the problems that employees take into the workplace? Mm. Would it not be the moral right thing to do to support them there as well? You know, you could have a child who's had a nasty diagnosis, or you could have been burgled the night before, you're in the middle of divorce proceedings, whatever the case may be, which will make your mental health go south and you will not be able to do your job properly. So why not support that person? It makes good business sense, and it makes excellent human sense. Mm. And we have those little responsibilities. We don't need politicians to tell us how to do that. We just need to be human beings to one another. And that is still too much in short supply, I think. Mm. But at first, if you don't ask for help, you will not get help.
Mm. It's interesting, his targets on the NHS to reduce suicide. As you say, I'm not quite sure what that means. Is it when someone is rushed into hospital and A&E when they've tried to take their own life? Is it a case of trying to, improve their recovery, or is it getting more targets of more psychologists, more counsellors, more GPs to actually work on the prevention side? But we need the people to go to seek help before to actually make that happen. You don't want to be at the curative, the fix, the A&E end. We want to be at the preventative end. And I'm not quite sure how he's going to do that. I'm hoping that perhaps, more detail will come later. It leaves lots and lots of questions about the target-driven approach to reducing suicide.
One thing very few people think about is the knock-on effect of one suicide. Mm. Research is wonderful, but it gives us an idea about what happens. So for every suicide, between 6 and 136 people are affected. So that means that other people's lives are now in ruins or in some way negatively affected by just one person taking their own life. And that has a knock-on society on your ability to do your work, on how families function. They may split up because of this. There might be all sorts of things going on for each suicide. So it's a far bigger problem than just one life lost. It's those who survive that person who really are in deep trouble as well. And then that puts more pressure on those helping organizations and individuals like you and I, because there might be some people who will need help to deal with somebody else's suicide. So it is important, I think, to do the prevention. The cure, we can only deal with what you can deal with once a person comes to see us, whether it's on the road to crisis or if it is at crisis point. I know that this year I have, I believe, saved one life already by helping that person to not go and end it all. Mm. And I'm happy with that. I don't have a target. I don't need to reach a certain number. I just need to deal with one person at a time. But I'm not the NHS.
The other thing that just popped up for me as well is if I was working in the NHS at the moment and I see, his recent saying about, the targets, how would I feel knowing that I'm working in the NHS, doing all that I possibly can already, and then being expected, yes, we don't know how, granted, we don't know how this is going to happen, but if I'm already doing my absolute utmost best, how am I expected to also, or we, the NHS, expected to reach those targets? How are we supposed to reach that when we already are struggling? And the ripple effect of that. We know the mental health or poor mental health and the suicide rates in the NHS are increasing. We have to think about those as well. And if you're in that environment and you're constantly seeing people coming in, attempted suicides, they patch them up, they go back into the community in a few weeks, months, they come back again. how is that for the professionals in the NHS to see that as well? I think that's something else that we must all remember, that they're doing what they can already, and to
I think
put
that's
targets on them.
I think that's an extremely good point. How is this affecting those who are now being told you will be having new targets? They're already working to capacity. So this is what we think. Let us know what you think. Maybe you work in the NHS. Maybe you have some strong views on this. We would love to hear them. But thank you so much for listening and watching so far. Take care. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.